Another end of the year. It's that time to wrap it all up with countdowns and lists, and boy do I love my year-end lists. If I had to define this year for EDM, I think it would be something along the lines of lacking giants and impressive breakthroughs. We got a couple of bigger projects from bigger names like Swedish House Mafia, Diplo, and Martin Garrix, but overall found it to be a pretty slow year for the commercial EDM crowd. But on the other hand, there were so many new artists starting to blossom into mainstays. We've got the likes of more Kismet, Reaper, Murata, and so many more. It's the first year in a while where I felt a real shift in the landscape, moving more towards purposefully uplifting newer producers. But just before we get into the main video, let's just remember that this list is my opinion. Honestly, it's quite tough to nail down just 10 songs I wanted to talk about, but I guess I had to. So without any further ado, let's hop into what I believe to be the top 10 EDM songs of 2022. I mentioned right off the top that this was a phenomenal year for up-and-coming artists. What I believe to be and what I love the most about newer artists is the ability to create something truly unique. Once you hit a certain threshold of popularity and commercial success, it's hard to be out there and innovative, as it's perceived as riskier and won't stream well. So in that sense, there is a kind of certain beauty between a first release and commercialized success. There were so many options I could have picked to start this list off, as this spot was by far the hardest choice to make. So instead of picking one song, I'm gonna pick two? Kind of? Ever since I watched Swarty's Secret Sky set in 2020, I've been hooked. He had such a unique tone and style that pairs marvelously with his raw instrumentation and calming melodies. 2022 saw the release of Swarty's debut album Compact Objects, and honestly this song and the title track could have both filled this number 10 spot. The record is more of a concept album with a short runtime and lack of any real kind of singles, but in the end it was the final track of You Belong, Built Myself that hooked me the most. Split into two distinct sections, You Belong begins with Swarty's signature Atlantic brass sound and transforms into his most grand track to date. Utilizing a tenor vocal range instead of his usual pitched up soprano was a welcome change that added some much needed emphasis to the track. Then in the back half, the track morphs into Swarty's most happy-go-lucky sound yet. Built Myself is a fast-paced, sail away into the sunset kind of track that does a brilliant job of wrapping up the whole album on a high note. You Belong, Built Myself is a beautifully bipolar track that I will be listening to for many years to come. I am stoked to see what Swarty is going to dish up in the future. Back in the early 2010s, EDM was starting to really blossom, and one of the premier artists at the time was Deadmau5. He had a very distinct progressive electro-fusion style of house with long run times and relatively minimalistic melodies. And while Deadmau5 continues to tackle that sound design today, pretty much all of the imitators of that day have moved on to their own styles and sounds, leaving a fairly big hole in that style of house music that Deadmau5 just reigns supreme in. So imagine my surprise when I heard someone else trying to tackle and take a crack at that old kind of Deadmau5 style. Maybe they did it even better. No Mana popped onto Monstercat late in 2022, and in doing so landed on my radar for the first time. And while I wasn't blown away by their other two Monstercat tracks this year, Out of the Dark was a clear standout. Listening to this track transports me to a simpler time. A little Bowtied who was exploring EDM for the first time, in awe of the drops and melodies he was hearing. I'm not sure if this is just nostalgic for me only, but this is the perfect balance of a familiar song structure and design that I grew up on, jammed into modern production quality and mastering. There hasn't been any indication of these tracks being part of some larger project for 2023, but I have high hopes for a packaged compilation of some sorts, whether an LP or an EP. Regardless, I'm happy to have found No Mana this year and am excited to see what the next year will hold. If you've been around this channel for some time and or are familiar with my thoughts on melodic dubstep, you know that I think the genre needs to die. Artists like Illenium and Slander have given the genre a bad rap the last couple of years. I think personally you may disagree with that, but there is a fairly niche subculture of melodic dubstep that is absolutely wonderful. Artists like AU5 and Chime continue to capture a truly melodic sound of dubstep with grand production, non-cheesy lyrics, and sometimes some color bass influences. Of those artists, there was a trio of producers that put together an epic dubstep track that gives me chills every single time. Placed at the end of an already incredible EP, you've got to hear this audible nectar. Skybreak's Moonglow EP was one of the best projects in EDM this year. And well, what do you think is going to happen when you put together a 5-minute banger that perfectly encapsulates said EP? Well, you land on this list. It's simple as that. Calling on Aethoro and Mizu for production assistance, Journey's End may be one of the best dubstep tracks of the last couple years. This track has multiple enticing movements, bringing you along on a ride of serene melodies, beautiful piano licks, bold key changes, and heart-pounding synths. If melodic dubstep producers would take this approach to the genre, I would be fighting for its survival rather than hoping for its demise. Thank you, Skybreak and crew, for keeping this sound alive for me.
Nothing.
There's a certain duo that I've had an affinity for quite some time. They are my #1 most streamed artist on Spotify and almost always land on this year-end list of mine. So to be fully transparent, I was really only stuck between which song of theirs I wanted to land on this list. And after a bit of self-deliberation, I thought it was only right to give it to the track that started off their 2022 run. I want to take a moment off the top here to tell you that of all the shows and concerts I've ever been to, Odesza is without a doubt the best live performance I have ever seen. If you ever have the opportunity or chance to go see them, you need to immediately. You will not regret it. The Last Goodbye is a structurally simplistic track with lots of room for expansion. Starting with a strong yet minimalistic first drop, each of the following 2 drops add a layer of instrumentation, culminating in a fully fledged, expansive track in the end. And to tie it all together, sampling Bettye LaVette's Let Me Down Easy was a brilliant choice, as her powerful voice became a calling cry for the rest of the record. While I personally enjoyed both Light of Day and Equal probably more than this track, I think this song exemplifies the year as a whole for Odesza. There's a certain beauty in the mixtape format that I don't think EDM producers utilize as much as they should. For clarification, a mixtape is more or less a compilation of songs that aren't put together in a linear or narrative structure. In the end, it's really just up to the artist whether or not they want to categorize it as an album or a mixtape or even an EP or compilation. But there is something special about a mixtape in which an artist goes ham on a bunch of tracks, not trying too hard to keep tonal cohesion or a story going. It often makes for a lot of quicker single style of tracks coming in fast and loose and exiting just as swiftly. It may be a shorter song, but oh boy, this next one, whew, it's good.
Don't worry about me, babe, you know I will behave. Just came over in hopes to put a name to a face.
Sam Gellaitry is another artist that got put on my radar this year with his VF Volume 2 mixtape. The whole project is predominantly French house, taking clear inspiration from Daft Punk's discography. Amongst this track are some other highlights like Star of the Moment, Euphoria, and New Wave. But in the end, it was Name to a Face that really stole the show for me. Bright and rhythmic production is the name of the game here. The whole track has a disco thematic layered over a house beat that is primed for any club mix. Even though Fred again may have stolen the year with his Boiler Room mix, I'd love to see Sam tackle it again with these new tracks. EDM and gaming have always had such a complementary relationship. Whether it's Fortnite, Rocket League, Smite, or Valorant, the two medias have always intertwined for mutual success. But there is one company that does it better than anyone else: Riot Games. Creating collaboration songs for events and tournaments with the likes of Imagine Dragons, Zed, Lil Nas X, Grabbitz, and oh yeah, just one of the most influential modern EDM producers out there. Robinson took a relatively relaxing year with releases after the stunner that was his 2021. This collaboration with League of Legends for their Star Guardian event was teased for months leading up to the song's release, with potentially more hype for this single song than his whole last album. Potentially, I'm not sure. And when it finally dropped, it did not disappoint. The amount of people that told me that this was their favorite Porter song definitely took me by surprise. This truly felt like a match made in heaven. The overlap of League and Porter enjoyers seemed to be unusually high. Porter just has that innate ability to craft some of the most uplifting, joyful atmospheres, and then right hook you with some of the saddest, most melancholy lyrical content. Without the lyrics, everything goes on feels like running through a bed of flowers at sunrise in the middle of summer with a warm breeze. But the lyrics, well, they explain the finiteness of life and how when it's all over, the world just goes on without you. So don't even bother trying to remember me. It's a deep cut, and one that I know resonated with a lot of listeners. I've always loved the underdog story, the one that nobody really noticed or cared about until that one moment where everything changed and they became the center of attention. In the same vein, watching an artist go from zero to hero with a single project is a special occasion that seldom happens. There are just so many competing sounds, styles, and, well, more popular artists out there to fight with. Yet so many artists are so complementary of each other. If you like this artist, you'll love this artist and also appreciate what this artist has done and have this artist on repeat. It's something I find beautiful about music and its surrounding culture. So what happens when you mash together the sounds of Flume, drum and bass, and some young talent? IMANU's rise has been nothing short of impressive. Having been on the scene for just over 2 years, he's seemingly already cemented a legacy for himself with crisp drum and bass production, creative melodies, and his young inspiration. This track in particular is the leading track off of his debut album Unfold and is very much influenced by Flume. From the KUČKA feature to the off-kilter drum pattern to the glitchy synth lines, it really feels like an homage to Flume, if anything. And honestly, it's pretty ballsy to lead a project off with what could be seen as a carbon copy of another artist's style, but it works really well when you do it just as good, maybe even better. As an opener, this is one of the best. It hooks you in and catches your attention with a familiar sound and style, and then brings you in with the heavy guns and hits you right after, immediately with Empress and Show You on the backside of the 2 tracks after. I think it's hard to fully grasp how influential this song will be in IMANU's career at this point. It's something I predict that we'll look back on in 10, maybe 20 years and note as a classic. This next entry is one that you could argue doesn't belong on this list, more than any other. Not because it's a bad song, no, it's actually quite amazing, but merely because it doesn't really fall neatly into that umbrella EDM category. But this artist definitely isn't shy to those genres. It's not uncommon nowadays to see EDM producers take a different route in their careers while still being influenced by those electronic sounds. Think of Tristam turning to more of a pop sound, or Puppet making more rock. But, in the end, this is my list. I'm going to do what I want. So here we go. There aren't many songs that I love right away, but this was definitely one of them. The change in style from a more alternative R&B to dubstep caught me so off guard. I loved it. Grabbitz' vocals lend itself beautifully to the track, as well as bringing energy without being overpowering, letting the production speak for itself when it wants to. And the best part of the track, just the subtlest, it's just such a fun, carefree track with a destructive back end that lends itself so nicely to repeat listens. And that guitar solo in the back third isn't overly complex instrumentation, but acts as the glue between those two distinct movements. I think it's hard to find such a chaotic song in today's musical landscape that isn't too abrasive, yet has an intensity that makes it exciting to listen to again and again and again. Grabbitz killed it on this track, killed it on the whole Time Isn't Real album, even the whole year of 2022. He did such a good job. This was truly Grabbitz's year, and he took it by storm.
Speed of light, yeah, I need it right. Nah, speed of light, yeah, I need it right.
If you've caught on to how this list works by now, you'll know that before each new entry, I don't say the name of the artist until it's been revealed. Yet that rule has been sort of broken with this penultimate track. I love grand finales, a final reveal, an all-encompassing movement that wraps a neat little bow on top of everything. A bow tie, you could say. So when it comes to a final track of an album, I set unusually high expectations for it, especially when it's the final song of the album that is the title track of the album as well. So thank you, Flume, for not making this disappointing. Palaces is one of the most unique grand finale songs I think I've heard in a long time. The song has all of the motifs and movements to be a grandiose mic drop with a long build and stoic vocals, yet breaks the mold in its conclusion. There is no real drop at the end of this song to the end of the album. It just sort of builds and builds and then poof, it's gone. It's over. The album's done. It needs to be properly executed or it will taint the rest of the album. While I didn't love the kind of confusing and inferred narrative of the overall record of Palaces, this individual song is really the only track that utilizes that kind of bird thematic. All throughout the track you can hear kind of noises in the back, and the weird vocal noise sample mimics that of a bird call kind of trapped in some form of technology. And then Damon Albarn joins the fray here. Best known as the creative mind behind the virtual band Gorillaz, his passive vocal performance is exactly what needs to be on this album to close it out.
A thought beyond the exit. There would be palaces.
All in all, this was a bold choice in a final track, title track, and song structure that if just one of those things was out of place would have set the record in a totally different direction. I just love when artists really go for it and it all comes together so well. Before we get to number one, I want to give a couple honorable mentions. Tracks that could have easily made this list, but fell a little short.
Get through.
So without any further ado, let's hop into the number one spot. This is honestly my favorite part of the lists. The anticipation and drama for what's going to be number one, who's the top dog, what's the best EDM song of 2022. Some of you know what you're about to hear. You just know. And if you don't know, let me take you on a little bit of a journey through musical bliss. Yep, Dead Man Walking, the #1 voted song for Monster Cat's Best of 2022 compilation, my favorite song of the year, an instant classic. Grant has been one of my favorite artists for years, and I've been loving Ellis's electro-funk style recently as well. This really felt like a match made in heaven. Grant and Ellis's styles worked terrifically together, and in under just 3 minutes, managed to be hands down the greatest listening experience of the year. This was without a doubt the single most majestic first-time listening experience I have ever had. I was giddy. I was on the verge of tears. I was so blown away by what I was listening to. I loved it. So what exactly makes this track so good? Well, you've got the layered guitars, the Grant's vocals, the deep, Ellis's funk synth on those drops. It all works together so effortlessly. Grant and Ellis really did pull together the greatest track of the year in my opinion, and not just even in EDM scene. I think in all of music. Now I know that's just my opinion obviously, and you probably don't share that, but my goodness, this hit me in an area I didn't even know existed. So that's it, my top 10 EDM songs of 2022. What a crazy year, and I'm glad to have had these songs along for the ride. Okay, 2023, time to bring it on. Show us what you got.